The smell of lemon polish and old wood, the scent I'd always associated with safety, with home, was thick in the air. I'd just finished buffing the banister, the one I'd stripped and restained myself 2 summers ago. That's when the key turned in the lock. I wasn't expecting anyone. My name is Presley, by the way, and up until that moment, I thought I had a decent handle on my life, even if my family was, well, my family. My mother, Rosalyn, breezed in, her smile a little too bright, a little too sharp. Behind her, practically glued to her shoulder, was my brother, Edgar. His smirk was the first alarm bell. It was the kind of smirk he got when he knew he was about to get away with something usually at my expense. "Presley, darling," Rosalyn chirped, her eyes sweeping over the gleaming hallway, not with appreciation, but with something that felt more like assessment. "We need to talk." I leaned the polish cloth on the newel post. "Okay, everything all right?" Edgar snorted, a small dismissive sound. "Everything's fantastic for some of us." Rosalyn shot him a look that wasn't quite admonishing, more like a wait-for-it glance. "Now, Edgar, Presley, we have some news. Big news." She practically vibrated with an excitement that made my stomach clench. "We're selling the house," she announced, her voice dripping with a sweetness that was pure poison. I blinked. "Selling? This house? What are you talking about?" My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from the end of a long tunnel. This wasn't just any house. This was the house I'd grown up in, the house I'd poured every spare cent and every ounce of sweat into for the last 5 years, transforming it from a neglected relic into something beautiful. My beautiful. "That's right," Edgar piped up, stepping forward. He puffed out his chest a little. "Mum's decided it's time, and the money is going to be very helpful for my new venture." His new venture. Another one. I could already picture the flowchart. Enthusiastic start, flashy spending, poor decisions, inevitable collapse, followed by him crawling back to Rosalyn for a bailout. Rinse and repeat. Only this time the bailout was my home, your venture. I looked from his smug face to Rosalyn's triumphant one. "But this is my home. I live here. I've fixed it up, you know that." The new roof, the updated plumbing, the kitchen I'd gutted and rebuilt practically board by board, the garden I'd coaxed back to life. Rosalyn waved a dismissive hand, adorned with too many rings. "Oh, don't be dramatic, Presley. You've done a bit of decorating, it's true. Very quaint." She practically spat the word. "But your brother needs this. He has a real opportunity here, a chance to finally make something of himself." The implication hung heavy in the air, unlike me, apparently. "And what about me?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Where am I supposed to go?" "Well, that's the other part of the news," Rosalyn said, her smile widening, if that was even possible. "You're getting evicted, dear." She said it like she was announcing I'd won a raffle. "The house is sold, and your brother needs this more than you. Consider it your contribution." Sold! Evicted! The words slammed into me, knocking the air from my lungs. My contribution? I felt a cold wave wash over me, followed by a burning heat. Edgar, bless his cotton socks, decided to elaborate. "Yeah, it's a done deal. Got a buyer lined up and everything. Quick sale." He rubbed his hands together. "So you'll need to be out soon. And for all your efforts," Rosalyn continued, pulling an envelope from her purse, "we've decided to give you a little something. A share, if you will." She held it out. I took it, my fingers numb. Inside, a check for $5,000. $5,000. I looked at the figure, then up at them. Laughter, raw and incredulous, threatened to bubble up. The materials alone for the kitchen had cost more than that. The new boiler, the rewiring. I'd sunk nearly 60,000 of my own money, not to mention the inheritance from Gran, into this place, and countless hours of my life. "This is a joke, right?" I finally managed, the cheque trembling in my hand. Rosalyn's smile faltered, replaced by a familiar look of impatience. "Don't be ungrateful, Presley. It's more than generous, considering. You've been living here practically rent-free for years." "Rent-free?" I echoed, my voice rising despite myself. "I paid the mortgage after Dad left. I paid the property taxes. I've paid for every single repair, every upgrade. You haven't put a penny into this place in over a decade." Edgar stepped in front of Rosalyn, protective. Now, sis. No need to get hysterical. Mum's name is on the deed too, remember? She's entitled to sell her asset." "Our asset," Rosalyn corrected him, patting his arm, "and we've decided this is the best use for it." Her eyes, cold and hard, met mine. "You always were a bit too attached to things, Presley. It's just bricks and mortar." Bricks and mortar. She had no idea, or maybe she did, and that was the point. Then Rosalyn produced another piece of paper, folded haphazardly. "And this is your official notice. You have 30 days. I unfolded it. It was handwritten on a piece of lined notebook paper, like something a child would scrawl. "Notice to vacate. You have 30 days to leave the premises at 12 Oak Street. Signed, Rosalyn May, owner." The sheer audacity of it, the crudeness, the utter lack of respect. It was breathtaking. "Don't make this difficult, Presley," Rosalyn said, her voice hardening. "It's a done deal. The papers are practically signed." I clutched the pathetic notice, the paper crinkling in my fist. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. Shock was still there, a tidal wave of it, but beneath the icy water something else was stirring, a tiny hot spark. They thought I'd just roll over. They thought I'd cry, pack my bags, and disappear with their insulting share. They really didn't know me at all. They left, just like that. Rosalyn gave a final, satisfied glance around my hallway, and Edgar, bless his heart, actually whistled as he walked out the door, probably already spending his imaginary windfall. I stood there, the flimsy eviction notice still clenched in my hand, the $5,000 cheque lying on the console table like a dead cockroach. For a good 10 minutes, I didn't move. I just listened to the silence of the house, a silence that suddenly felt mocking. Then I walked into the kitchen. My kitchen. I ran my hand over the cool quartz countertop I'd saved for a year to buy. I looked at the custom-built shelves I'd designed and installed with a patient carpenter friend. Bricks and mortar? She had no idea. But as the initial shockwave receded, that tiny spark of anger I'd felt earlier began to glow. They expected me to crumble. They expected tears and pleas. They expected me to pack up my little life and slink away defeated. Fine, let them think that. The next day, Rosalyn called. "Presley, dear, just checking in. How are the packing plans coming along? Found a new place yet?" Her voice was syrupy, laced with that fake concern she did so well. "Oh, hi, Mother," I said, pitching my voice to sound small and overwhelmed. "Yes, I've started looking at boxes. It's a lot to take in." "Well, don't dawdle," she chirped. 30 days isn't as long as it sounds, and Edgar is so excited to get things moving with his project." "Right," I said, "his project." Edgar called too, a few days later. "Hey, sis, just wanted to make sure you're not, dragging your feet. That buyer is eager. We got a really good price, super quick. You wouldn't want to mess that up, would you?" "No, Edgar," I said, keeping my voice flat. "Wouldn't want to mess up your good price." Between their condescending calls, I wasn't just packing. Oh no, I was on a mission. My grief was still there, a heavy ache in my chest, but it was now fueling a cold, methodical rage. I started in the small office I'd carved out of a former pantry. I pulled out the battered accordion file labelled house. Every receipt, every single one. The invoice from Samir, the contractor who'd re-shingled the roof and patiently taught me how to use a nail gun. The bill for the energy-efficient windows I'd had installed. The statements from the hardware store, itemizing lumber, paint, tile, grout, fixtures. I spread them across the floor, a paper trail of my life for the past 5 years. I found the USB drive with the before and after photos. God, the before pictures. The sagging porch, the peeling paint, the kitchen that looked like a relic from the 70s, complete with avocado green appliances. I remembered the sheer exhaustion of those first few months living in a construction zone, dust coating everything. I remembered Rosalyn visiting once, wrinkling her nose and saying, "Are you sure you know what you're doing, dear? It looks rather ambitious." Ambitious? She'd said it like it was a character flaw. I remembered a conversation vividly about 3 years ago. I'd just finished renovating the main bathroom, tiling it myself painstakingly until my back screamed. Rosalyn had come over, ostensibly to see it. She'd glanced in, murmured, blue, and then, as she was leaving, she'd patted my arm. "You're putting so much into this old place, Presley. It's good. This house will always be your home, you know. A safe place for you. A safe place." The words echoed mockingly in my head as I scanned another bank statement, highlighting the transfers for materials, the payments to the plumber, the electrician. My grandmother's inheritance, the modest sum she'd left specifically to me, Seiki, whispering, "For your future, darling, something just for you," had all gone into this safe place. Edgar had blown through his much larger share from Gran in less than 6 months on a guaranteed crypto scheme. My search for documents became more forensic. I wasn't just looking for proof of my investment anymore. I was looking for anything. In the bottom drawer of the old desk in the spare room, Dad's old desk, under a pile of outdated tax forms, I found a slim, forgotten folder. It contained old correspondence, mostly bills, but then I saw it, an email printout. It was from Rosalyn to a financial advisor dated nearly 10 years ago. My breath caught. She was asking about ways to structure Edgar's allowance. Even then, he was getting an allowance well into his 20s to minimize his tax liabilities. She mentioned something about a small inheritance he'd received from a distant aunt and how to best protect it from unnecessary deductions. It wasn't illegal, not exactly, but the language was slippery. It spoke of a mindset, a comfort with navigating the grey areas of finance for Edgar's benefit. I sat back in the dusty chair, the email trembling slightly in my hand. A grim realization settled over me. This scheme to sell the house from under me, to undervalue it for a quick sale, to fund Edgar's latest disaster. It wasn't a desperate one-off idea born of his current predicament. "This isn't their first rodeo," I muttered to the empty room, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. This was a pattern, and I was just the latest casualty. But this time, I wasn't going down without a fight. The next morning, armed with my meticulously organised files and a printout of that damning email, I called Alyssa. A colleague had given me her number months ago after a minor dispute with a landlord, describing her as a shark, but the kind you want on your side. Alyssa's office was sleek, modern, and a little intimidating. She listened, her expression unreadable, as I laid out the whole sordid tale, the eviction, the poultry check, Rosalyn's glee, Edgar's entitlement, the years of my labour and money poured into the house. I spread out the before and after photos, the receipts, the bank statements. "They're offering 5,000, I finished, my voice tight, for what amounts to nearly 60,000 in documented materials and professional labour, not to mention my own sweat equity, and the initial 20,000 from my grandmother's inheritance that went into making the down payment manageable after Dad left, and Rosalyn declared herself too stressed to contribute." Alyssa finally leaned back, tapping a pen against a notepad. Ms. May. Presley, she corrected herself, a flicker of something in her eyes. Respect, maybe? This is quite a situation. Tell me about it, I said, trying for a wry tone that didn't quite land. Your mother and brother are on the deed, you said. Yes. It was originally in my father's and mother's names. After the divorce, it went solely to Rosalyn. When I started the major renovations and was investing significant capital, she added my name, supposedly for my security. Clearly, that was a lie. And this buyer they have lined up? Alyssa asked, her gaze sharp. Do you know who it is, or the sale price? Edgar just said it was a really good price, super quick. No details. They're being very cagey. Alyssa nodded slowly. Based on what you've shown me, Presley, you have a strong case for a significant financial settlement to recoup your investment. That's the civil side. But this smells of more than just a family squabble over assets. She picked up the printout of Rosalyn's old email. This hints at a willingness to play fast and loose with finances. If they're deliberately undervaluing the property for a quick cash sale to an associate, especially to avoid capital gains or to facilitate Edgar's ventures, we could be looking at fraud, tax evasion. The words hung in the air, criminal charges. It was one thing to want my money back, to want them to pay for the betrayal. It was another to imagine them facing the law. A shiver went down my spine, but it wasn't entirely unpleasant. What do you suggest? I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. First, we put them on notice, a cease and desist on any sale until your equitable interest is determined. Second, I start digging into this supposed sale. And third, she gave me a direct look, you keep playing the part of the dutiful, slightly overwhelmed daughter. Don't let them know you've lawyered up. Not yet. That evening, I met my best friend Vienna at our usual coffee spot. I spilled everything. Vienna listened, her eyes growing wider and angrier with each detail. That absolute witch! Vienna finally exploded, slamming her mug down a little too hard. And Edgar, I swear, Presley, if I ever see him... I know, I said, managing a weak smile. But getting angry won't help right now. I need to be smart. You are smart, Vienna insisted, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. You're the smartest, most capable person I know, and you're going to nail them to the wall. What can I do? Just having her there, her unwavering belief in me, was like a balm to my frayed nerves. Just be here, I said. Let me vent, and maybe help me look through some more old boxes this weekend. Back at the house, fueled by caffeine and Vienna's support, I decided to tackle my grandmother's old writing desk. It was a beautiful antique piece I'd never really gone through properly. I was looking for any old property tax bills, anything that might show a pattern of Rosalyn's financial involvement or lack thereof. The drawers were mostly filled with old stationery, dried-up pens and newspaper clippings. But as I ran my hand along the underside of the main drawer, my fingers brushed against a small, almost invisible catch. I pressed it. With a faint click, a thin, hidden compartment at the back of the drawer sprang open. Inside, nestled on a piece of faded velvet, was a small leather-bound diary. My grandmother's handwriting, elegant and familiar, filled the pages. My heart pounded. I opened it, my hands trembling slightly. The entries weren't daily, but they spanned years, and they painted a picture. Rosalyn seems determined to spoil Edgar. He can do no wrong in her eyes. I worry about her judgment. Another entry. Had a rather unsettling conversation with Rosalyn today about family finances. She seems to view them as her personal slush fund. I fear for what might happen when I'm gone. And then one that made me gasp. Edgar has developed a taste for risk. Rosalyn indulges him, bails him out. I've tried to speak to her, but she becomes defensive. I worry she will sacrifice anything or anyone for him. It was like my grandmother was speaking to me from beyond the grave, validating every fear, every suspicion. She'd seen it all, years ago. This wasn't just about me and the house. This was a lifelong pattern of manipulation and enablement. The next day, Alyssa called. "Presley, I have some information on that buyer." Her voice was grim. "The property isn't being sold to an individual. It's being sold to a newly formed LLC, registered just 3 weeks ago." An LLC, yes. And guess who one of the registered agents is? Alyssa paused for effect. A Mr. Neil Tucker. Does that name mean anything to you? I frowned. Tucker? Neil Tucker? Vaguely. Wasn't he one of Edgar's less reputable friends from a few years back? The one involved in that failed nightclub thing? The very same, Alyssa confirmed. Mr. Tucker has a bit of a reputation for, shall we say, creative financial solutions. Shell companies, quick flips. They're not just trying to sell it cheap, Presley. They're trying to wash it. Wash it? I repeated, the term sounding as dirty as it implied. So they're selling it to Edgar's shady friend for a lowball price. He flips it, and then Edgar gets clean money? Or, Alyssa said, her voice tight, the LLC buys it with questionable funds to begin with, and the lowball price means less scrutiny, fewer taxes. Either way, it's a classic setup for something fishy. This Neil character is not someone you want involved in your property sale if you're aiming for above board. My grandmother's diary, Alyssa's discovery, it was all clicking into place. This wasn't just about greed, it was about desperation and a long-practiced deceit. So, what now? I asked, a cold resolve settling in my stomach. Now, Alyssa said, we let them think they're winning. You continue your packing, let them see you being compliant. The more confident they get, the more careless they'll become. So, I played my part. I bought a stack of moving boxes from the hardware store. I started filling them with things I didn't care much about. Old paperbacks, clothes I hadn't worn in years, knickknacks from the back of cupboards. I left the boxes stacked conspicuously in the living room, where Rosalyn was sure to see them on her inevitable check-in visits. And visits she did. "Oh, good girl," she cooed, seeing the boxes. "Making progress, I see. It's for the best, you know. Edgar was on the phone with his new partners just this morning. They're so impressed with his vision." She beamed, as if Edgar had just cured cancer instead of planning another doomed enterprise. Edgar, when he deigned to call, was even worse. "Heard you're finally getting your act together, sis," he said, his voice oozing smugness. "About time. This new deal, it's gonna be huge. You'll see. You'll all see." He actually sounded like a villain from a bad movie. Internally, I was cataloguing every word, every condescending smirk. Each one was another nail in the coffin they were building for themselves. Meanwhile, Alyssa wasn't idle. She made a few discreet calls. Just preliminary inquiries, as she put it, to contacts who knew of Neil Tucker's operations. She didn't mention my name or the house specifically, just floated some general questions about LLCs and property transfers involving him. It was like poking a hornet's nest with a very long, lawyer-shaped stick. A few days later, I was in the kitchen, ostensibly sorting through spice jars, when my phone, left on the counter, buzzed with an incoming call from Rosalyn. I let it go to voicemail, as per Alyssa's instructions not to seem too eager or too available. A minute later, it buzzed again. This time, I answered, feigning a slight breathlessness. "Presley, where were you? I've been trying to call." Rosalyn's voice was sharp, a distinct contrast to her usual syrupy tones. "Oh, hi, Mother. Sorry, I was just in the attic, looking for more boxes." "Never mind that," she snapped. "Listen, have you spoken to anyone about the house, about us selling it?" My heart gave a little jump. Spoken to anyone? Like who? Vienna knows I have to move, if that's what you mean. There was a pause. I could hear faint, agitated murmuring in the background. Edgar's voice. No, not Vienna, Rosalyn said, her voice tight. Just anyone. Anyone official, or anyone who might ask awkward questions. Awkward questions? Mother, what are you talking about? I'm just trying to pack. I made sure to sound bewildered, maybe a little hurt. It's nothing, it's just Edgar had a call from Neil. Apparently someone has been sniffing around, asking about his businesses. Neil is getting nervous. Her voice dropped. He said we need to speed things up. Get the sale finalised, quickly. Bingo. Alyssa's inquiries were working. They were spooked. Oh, I said, trying to sound concerned. Nervous? Why would he be nervous? Is everything okay with the sale? Everything is fine, Rosalyn insisted, a little too loudly. It's just paperwork. Lawyers, you know, always complicating things. Just make sure you're ready to be out on time, Presley. No delays, understand? Yes, Mother, I said meekly. I understand. I hung up, a grim smile playing on my lips. The cracks were starting to show. Their united front of smug confidence was beginning to crumble under the first hint of pressure. Edgar's desperation, which I'd always sensed simmering beneath his bravado, was clearly bubbling to the surface if he was panicking Neil. The next evening, I was taking out the trash when I found it. A small, plain white envelope, no stamp, just my name, Presley, scrawled across it in blocky, unfamiliar handwriting. It had been slipped under the front door. My fingers fumbled as I tore it open. Inside, a single piece of paper with a typed message. Some things are best left alone. Think about your future. No signature, just that. Vague, menacing. I stared at it, the cheap paper feeling suddenly cold in my hand. This wasn't Rosalyn's style. This was cruder. This had Edgar written all over it, or at least Edgar outsourcing his intimidation tactics to someone like Neil. They thought this would scare me. They thought a little anonymous threat would make me back down, pack my bags faster and disappear. Instead, as I stood there in the fading light, the threatening note in my hand, I didn't feel fear. I felt a surge of icy fury so potent it almost took my breath away. They were escalating, and so would I. The threatening note was a miscalculation on their part, a big one. It didn't intimidate me, it galvanized me. I immediately called Alyssa, my voice shaking but not with fear, with adrenaline. They left a note, Alyssa. A threat. I read it to her. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Okay, Presley, don't touch it any more than you have to. Put it in a plastic bag. This just moved up a notch. This is witness intimidation, or attempting to, on top of everything else. Her voice was flinty. They're getting sloppy and desperate. What do we do? I asked. We use it, Alyssa said simply. I was already preparing a preliminary report based on the LLC, Neil Tucker's involvement, and the clear undervaluation you've documented. This note, it adds a lovely little cherry on top. I'm sending everything we have to the state's Financial Crimes Unit and a courtesy copy to the IRS. This isn't just about your money anymore, Presley. This is about them defrauding the state, potentially the federal government. The thought of the IRS getting involved sent a delicious shiver down my spine. Rosalyn was terrified of the taxman. A few days later, I got my chance to add another piece to the puzzle. I knew Edgar had been trying to get local contractors to lowball quotes for any repairs the new buyer might need, probably to further justify the ridiculously low sale price. Samir, the contractor who'd done my roof and so much more, was a man of integrity. I decided to pay him a visit at his workshop, under the guise of asking for a recommendation for a good, cheap mover. "Presley, good to see you," Samir greeted me, wiping grease from his hands. Heard you were moving. Shame, after all the work you put into that place. It's a gem now." "Thanks, Samir," I said, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, well, family stuff, you know." I hesitated. Actually, something a bit weird happened. My brother, Edgar, he mentioned he might have spoken to you about the house. Samir's friendly expression clouded over. He put down his wrench. "Your brother?" he said, his voice flat. "Yeah, he called me last week." "Oh?" I prompted. Samir snorted. "He wanted me to, re-evaluate the work I did. Said he needed a statement saying the renovations were mostly cosmetic, minor stuff. Offered me a bonus if I could help him out with the paperwork for the sale." My blood ran cold. "A bonus? You mean a kickback?" "Call it what you want," Samir said, disgust evident in his tone. "He wanted me to lie, Presley, to say all that structural work, the new roof, the rewiring support I helped you coordinate with the electrician. He wanted me to say it was just a lick of paint and some new cabinet handles." He shook his head. "I told him where he could stick his bonus. I've got my reputation to think of, and frankly, what you did with that house? That was good, honest work. I'm not going to help him screw you over." I felt a wave of gratitude. "Samir, thank you. That means a lot." Then an idea sparked. Would you be willing to put that in writing? What he asked you to do? And maybe a fair assessment of the value of the work you did, the work you witnessed me doing?" Samir looked at me, then nodded slowly. "For you, Presley? Yeah, I can do that. That boy needs to learn that some things aren't for sale." He even let me record a brief conversation on my phone where he recounted Edgar's offer and his refusal. It was gold. Pure, unadulterated gold. Witness tampering, attempted bribery. When I relayed this to Alyssa, she was ecstatic. "Presley, you're a natural at this. Samir's affidavit and that recording. Edgar just handed us his head on a platter." Things started moving faster after that. Alyssa's reports to the authorities clearly hit a nerve somewhere, because a few days later, something happened that I never, ever expected. Rosalyn showed up at my door, unannounced, alone. The smugness was gone, completely. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and bloodshot. She looked old and scared. "Presley," she said, her voice a hoarse whisper. "Can I come in?" I stepped back, wary. She walked into the living room, the room with my carefully stacked, mostly empty boxes, and wrung her hands. "We need to talk," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She took a shaky breath. "This house sale, it's more complicated than you think." "Oh?" Tears welled in her eyes, actual tears. I'd seen Rosalyn cry maybe twice in my entire life, and both times were theatrical performances to get her own way. This felt different. This felt real. "Edgar, he's in trouble, Presley. Bad trouble." Her voice cracked. "He owes money, a lot of money, to very dangerous people." Loan sharks, of course. It always came back to Edgar's inability to manage money, his penchant for shortcuts and shady deals. "He thought this house sale would fix it," she continued, her words tumbling out. "A quick infusion of cash, pay them off, get them off his back. They've been making threats, horrible threats." She finally looked at me, her eyes pleading. "That's why we had to do it this way. So quickly, so underhandedly." So, my pain, my home, my investment, it was all just collateral damage in Edgar's latest screw-up, and she was admitting it. "We haven't been fair to you," she whispered, the understatement of the century. "But please, Presley, just let this go through. Take the money we offered, find a nice little apartment and leave quietly. Don't make trouble, please. If this sale falls through, if these people don't get their money, I don't know what they'll do to him." to us. She was actually begging. Rosalyn, my imperious, untouchable mother, was begging me to save Edgar. The irony was so thick I could have spread it on toast. I looked at her, at this wreck of a woman so different from the triumphant matriarch who had gleefully announced my eviction just a few weeks ago. I felt a flicker of something. Not pity, not yet, but a grim understanding of the depths of her desperation. I feigned confusion, a touch of fear. Mother, I don't understand. Dangerous people? What kind of trouble is Edgar in? This is all too much. I let my voice tremble. I just want to pack my things and go. I don't want any trouble. Her face flooded with relief. Oh, thank you, Presley, thank you. Just be quiet, don't talk to anyone. It'll all be over soon. She practically fled the house. I watched her go, my expression carefully neutral until the door clicked shut. Then I allowed myself a small, cold smile. Her panic was the best confirmation yet. They were trapped, and the trap was about to spring. Rosalyn's panicked visit was the signal. Alyssa and I had a hushed, intense call that evening. She's terrified, Presley, Alyssa said, a note of grim satisfaction in her voice. They know the walls are closing in. Her attempt to appeal to your better nature after that threatening note. Classic desperate move. They're trying every angle. So, what's the timeline now? I asked, pacing my kitchen, the one I'd poured my soul into, the one they were trying to rip away to pay off loan sharks. The audacity still boggled my mind. The eviction day is tomorrow, right? According to their little handwritten notice. That's right, I confirmed. 30 days to the day. Perfect, Alyssa said. I've spoken with Detective Smith from the Financial Crimes Unit. She's been reviewing Samir's affidavit, the recording, Neil Tucker's LLC setup, your grandmother's diary entries about their financial patterns, and, of course, the threatening note. They have enough to be very, very interested. They're not ready to make arrests yet, but they are ready to make their presence known and secure potential evidence. Meaning, Alyssa said, and I could almost hear her smile. They'll be paying a visit tomorrow morning, right around the time your dear mother and brother expect you to be hauling out your last box. A shiver of anticipation, cold and sharp, ran down my spine. So I just act normal. Let them come. Exactly. Let them walk right into it. The detective will handle the introductions. You just be the wronged party, which, by the way, you are. All our evidence is filed, secured. Your financial claims are documented. This is about them facing the music for the fraud, the conspiracy, the intimidation. That night, I didn't pack. I wandered through the house, my house, for what felt like the last time. Each room held a memory, not just of my childhood, but of my labour, my hopes. The smooth plaster on the walls I'd painstakingly repaired, the gleaming hardwood floors I'd refinished on my hands and knees, the garden out back, now dormant for the winter, but which had bloomed so beautifully under my care all summer. There was a deep ache of sorrow, a genuine grief for what this house had represented, a sanctuary I had built with my own hands. But intertwined with that sorrow was a steely thread of anticipation. Tomorrow, the charade would end. I barely slept. I kept replaying conversations in my head, Rosalyn's smug pronouncements, Edgar's sneering entitlement, their casual cruelty. And then I'd picture their faces when their grand plan imploded. It wasn't just about revenge anymore, though God knows that was a powerful motivator. It was about justice. It was about them finally facing consequences for a lifetime of selfish, manipulative behaviour. I thought about my grandmother's diary. I worry she will sacrifice anything, or anyone, for him. Gran had known. She'd seen this coming in a way. I wish she could be here to see this. Morning dawned, grey and cold. I made myself a cup of coffee, my hands surprisingly steady. I dressed carefully, Not in moving clothes, but in a smart blouse and trousers. I felt like an actress waiting in the wings, about to step onto the stage for the most important performance of her life. The house was quiet, holding its breath. I sat in the living room amidst the prop boxes, sipping my coffee. Waiting, right on cue, at 9 o'clock, a car pulled up outside. Rosalyn's sensible sedan. I heard 2 car doors slam. Footsteps crunched on the gravel path. I stood up, smoothed down my blouse, and walked to the front door, peering through the peephole. There they were. Rosalyn, looking impatient, tapping her foot. Edgar, next to her, was practically bouncing on the balls of his feet, a triumphant smirk already plastered on his face. He looked like a cat who'd not only gotten the cream, but had also managed to frame the dog for it. He caught sight of movement through the frosted glass panel of the door and rapped sharply, "Presley, open up! Chop, chop, time to go!" I took a deep breath. Showtime. I opened the door, schooling my features into a look of weary resignation. "Well, it's about time," Rosalyn said, pushing past me into the hall, her eyes immediately scanning for signs of my departure. "Are your things out on the curb? The movers will be here in an hour. Best get your last bits out." Edgar swaggered in behind her, hands in his pockets, looking around with an air of ownership. "Ready to see the back of this dump, sis?" he sneered. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out." His words, usually designed to wound, barely registered. My focus was on the street behind them. As Rosalyn took another step into the house, and Edgar turned to give me one last gloating look, a second car, a dark, unmarked sedan, pulled up quietly behind theirs. It was so smooth, so silent they didn't even notice. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a drumbeat counting down the final seconds. Rosalyn reached for the living room doorknob, probably intending to direct the imaginary movers. Edgar was still smirking at me, clearly relishing his moment. That's when the doors of the dark sedan opened. A man in a sharply pressed uniform, Sheriff Gary Watson by his name tag, stepped out, followed by a woman in a plain but authoritative suit. Detective Smith, I presumed. They moved with a quiet purpose that cut through Rosalyn and Edgar's smug bubble instantly. "Rosalyn May! Edgar May!" Sheriff Watson's voice was firm, not loud, but it carried an undeniable weight. It sliced through the morning air, and for a second everything seemed to freeze. Rosalyn, hand still on the doorknob, turned. Confusion flickered across her face, quickly followed by annoyance. Edgar's smirk faltered. "Officer, is there a problem?" Rosalyn asked, her tone haughty, already on the defensive. She gestured vaguely towards me, where I stood calmly in the doorway. "She's the one who should be leaving. This is still technically her eviction day, though she seems to be dragging her feet." The sheriff ignored her completely. His gaze, and that of Detective Smith, was fixed on Rosalyn and Edgar. "We have a warrant to investigate allegations of property fraud, conspiracy to defraud, and tax evasion concerning the sale of this residence, 12 Oak Street." Edgar went pale. I mean, sheet white, all the blood draining from his face so fast I thought he might faint. Rosalyn gasped, a choked, strangled sound, her hand flying to her chest. "A warrant? Fraud?" Rosalyn stammered, her composure cracking like cheap veneer. "This is outrageous. There must be some mistake. This is a simple property sale." "We don't believe it's quite that simple, ma'am," Detective Smith said, her voice cool and professional. She took a step forward, holding a file. "We have substantial evidence suggesting a conspiracy to undervalue this property for a fraudulent sale to a Shell LLC controlled by Mr. Neil Tucker, an associate of your son's. Neil Tucker." The name hung in the air. Edgar looked like he'd been punched in the gut. "Neil wouldn't," Edgar began, his voice a weak croak, then trailed off as Detective Smith continued. "We have Mr. Tucker's full cooperation as of late yesterday evening," she stated, and I saw Edgar flinch, actually physically recoil. He was quite forthcoming once confronted with his own potential liabilities regarding unregistered securities and facilitating questionable transactions. Rosalyn stared aghast. Cooperation? But he... Furthermore, Detective Smith went on, relentless, we have an affidavit from Mr. Samir McCoy detailing your son's attempt to solicit a false statement from him regarding the true value of renovations done to this property, including an offer of a kickback. That's witness tampering, Mr. May. Edgar opened and closed his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked wildly from the detective to his mother, then to me, a look of dawning horror mixed with pure, unadulterated panic. And then there's the matter of Mr. May's significant undeclared debts to certain unlicensed lenders, the sheriff added, his eyes narrowed on Edgar. A strong motive for needing to liquidate an asset quickly and quietly, wouldn't you say? The movers Rosalyn had mentioned, the ones due in an hour? They never arrived. Of course they didn't. They were as fictional as Edgar's business acumen. As of this moment, Sheriff Watson declared, his voice resonating with authority, all assets related to this investigation, including this house and any bank accounts tied to its proposed sale, are frozen pending further investigation. Frozen? The word hit Rosalyn like a physical blow. She swayed, her carefully constructed world visibly crumbling around her. Frozen! No, you can't! Edgar needs that money! We need... It was then, in that moment of utter devastation, that her eyes, wild and desperate, landed on me. The carefully constructed mask of the concerned mother, the smug victor, it all shattered. Raw, unfiltered fury contorted her features. "You!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You did this! You ungrateful, spiteful witch! After everything we've done for you, you've ruined us! You've ruined your brother!" I met her gaze, my own calm and steady. The years of her casual cruelty, her blatant favoritism, her utter disregard for my feelings, for my contributions, it all coalesced into a single, cold point of clarity. "No, Mother," I said, my voice even, carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "You did this to yourselves, you and Edgar. I just held up a mirror." I paused, letting the words sink in. Then, echoing her own dismissive phrase from weeks ago, I added, "Consider this my contribution." The effect was electric. Rosalyn looked as if I'd slapped her. Edgar, seeing his escape route and his mother's protection evaporate before his eyes, finally snapped. With a strangled cry of pure animal panic, he made a sudden, clumsy lunge, as if he could somehow bolt past the officers and disappear. It was a pathetic attempt. Sheriff Watson, despite his age, moved with surprising speed, intercepting him easily, his hand clamping onto Edgar's arm like a vice. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, son," he said, his voice dangerously low. Edgar crumpled, all fight gone, just a whimpering, terrified mess. Rosalyn completely lost it. She collapsed against the doorframe, sobbing hysterically, babbling incoherently about not going to jail, about how Edgar didn't mean it, how it was all a misunderstanding. The dream house, the one they'd tried to steal, the one Edgar had called a dump just minutes before, had become the stage for their worst nightmare. And I was the sole audience member with a front row seat. The aftermath was messy, just as Alyssa predicted. Lawyers talked in hushed, urgent tones. Accusations flew, mostly from Rosalyn, who tried to paint herself as Edgar's duped, loving mother, a victim of his folly and my vindictiveness. It didn't stick. The evidence was too clear, too meticulously documented. My grandmother's diary, detailing Rosalyn's long-standing pattern of enabling and manipulating for Edgar's benefit, proved particularly damning to her claims of ignorance. Edgar, faced with the testimony of Neil Tucker, who was singing like a canary to save his own skin, and Samir's damning affidavit and recording, didn't have a leg to stand on. The loan sharks, once their names surfaced in the investigation, became another serious problem for him, attracting the attention of even more law enforcement agencies. He was looking at serious charges: fraud, conspiracy, witness tampering, and a whole host of issues related to his gambling debts and the unsavoury characters he owed. Rosalyn was charged as an accomplice, her signature on all the falsified sale documents and her panicked attempts to silence me sealing her fate. The quick, cheap sale of the house was, of course, dead in the water. The property itself became a frozen asset, tangled in legal red tape. Alyssa was a rock star. She fought tooth and nail, not just for the criminal case to proceed, but for my financial stake. "They tried to erase your investment, Presley," she'd said, her eyes blazing. "We're going to make sure they can't." And she did. It took time, depositions, and more legal wrangling than I ever thought possible. But eventually, the courts acknowledged the full extent of my financial contributions to the house. From the recoverable assets, what little Rosalyn hadn't already funneled to Edgar's creditors or lawyers, I was awarded my documented investment, plus damages. It wasn't a windfall, not after legal fees, but it was significant. It was vindication. There were no tearful reconciliations, no deathbed apologies from Rosalyn, no sudden epiphany from Edgar. I received a few rambling, accusatory letters from prison, which Alyssa advised me to pass on to the authorities as potential further evidence of harassment. I cut all ties. Some distant relatives, fed a sob story by Rosalyn's remaining allies, took her side. I let them. They weren't part of my life anyway. The house, though, that was harder. Legally, once the dust settled, it was mine, free and clear of their tainted claims. But standing in those rooms, even after Rosalyn and Edgar were long gone, I didn't feel the same peace. The lemon polish and old wood scent was still there, but it was overlaid with the bitter aroma of betrayal. Every lovingly restored feature was a reminder of what they'd tried to do. It could never be the sanctuary it once was. So I made a decision. I called a realtor, a no-nonsense woman Alyssa recommended. "I want to sell it," I told her. "Fair market value, no rush, no shady deals, just clean." She understood. While the sale process began, I found a small, bright apartment across town, and with the initial settlement funds, I started to sketch. For years, I'd had a vague dream of opening a small workshop, a community space, a place where people could learn to build, to repair, to create. The opposite of the destruction and deceit I'd waded through. One afternoon, sitting in my new sunlit living room, a cup of coffee steaming beside me, I was working on a design for a workbench. My phone buzzed. It was Alyssa. "Presley, good news. We have a solid offer on Oak Street. Full asking price, clean financing. It's a young family. Apparently they love the kitchen." I smiled, a genuine, unforced smile. "That's great, Alyssa. Tell them it's theirs." After I hung up, I looked around my little apartment. It wasn't grand. It wasn't filled with years of history. But it was mine, untainted. I picked up a small framed photo from my desk, the only family picture I'd kept out. It was of my grandmother, her eyes kind, a knowing little smile on her face. I felt like she was nodding, approving. The revenge had been undeniably satisfying. Watching Rosalyn and Edgar face the consequences of their actions, seeing their smugness shatter, had brought a fierce, undeniable sense of justice. It had empowered me, shown me a strength I didn't know I possessed. I had ensured they couldn't hurt me like that again. But it came at a cost. The family I'd once had, however toxic and dysfunctional, was gone, irrevocably. There was an empty space there, a quiet ache that justice couldn't entirely fill. The fight had left scars, but scars heal, and new things can be built on cleared ground. I took a sip of my coffee, the warmth spreading through me. The smugness I'd seen on my mother's face that day, The day she'd tried to evict me was a distant memory. In its place, in my own heart, was a quiet, hard-won peace. They thought they were evicting me from a house. Turns out I was just taking out the trash so I could finally build a home.